What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video in our YouTube plugin building series. It's really plugin for beginners also / series. Hey, first things first, if you're not subscribed, subscribe, will you? In this video, in the last video actually, let me start there. We had left off with this, which was where we were. If you haven't watched that video, go back and watch it. This is kind of like a little two-part series in the course, in the overall course. We had an issue with our video display page where it was displaying videos on how they're imported into our database, meaning that, I'll show you right now. If we load all, we have 50 videos right now, and if we load them all, we built this issue in on purpose, by the way, so we could combat it later. This mini truck video, this Maserati, the Roadkill Maserati, it's actually the most recent video in this list, but the problem is they're being ordered by the way they're imported from the database, and we purposefully deleted this video and then we re-imported this video just to show you how it works. It actually puts it at the bottom, even though these are older, all the way up to the newer, and that's because we are calling these in based on how they're imported, their numbers. So see how they climb? 439, 44, in the bottom left corner you can see 440, 441, 442. Well, that Maserati truck was originally the first number, 487, and then it got deleted and renewed, and it renewed at 488. So we actually need to sort these based on the dates of their published at on YouTube, not of how we bring them into our site, and that'll make it so we can renew, update, and all that, and the newest videos will always show at the top. Alright, well, in the last video, we built a little function. It was actually a pretty short video. It was kind of a complicated one, though, and it was this little set of code here that goes ahead and, in our backend, shows you two different arrays, and the first array was how we were importing our videos normally, and the second one was when they were time sorted. Well, now that we have them time sorted, what do we do with this information? We have a date time, and we have an ID of the post. Well, both of these things make perfect sense to have, because once we know the date time sorted, and they're sorted, and then we have the post ID, we can go through the same loop of showing posts, but we can get them based on the IDs that we have gathered from this date time function, rather than just grabbing all the posts that are videos, and then we can sort them based on that. So this is exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to try to keep this simple, you guys, but this one's probably going to go over 10 minutes as well, because this is kind of another not advanced, it's just that we have to go around and take all the code that we've already built and kind of put it together in one spot. So as you know, this was in our importer call page. I did this just to show you on our importer, but it really doesn't even need to be there. It has no reason to be in our importer. It actually really needs to be right here in the short code that this page calls to. So if we go to our public folder, and then we go to the public class, down in the bottom, or not in the bottom, sorry, in the function we have for WP10 display vid, this is the one that's displaying the videos on that 6 block page, this one here with the load more button, and we actually built that in a few videos ago. We updated it to have the load more videos and all that. Well, we're going to do the same thing, except what we're going to do is we're going to actually change all this information that it's calling to. We're going to use a lot of the code we wrote before. This is how I planned it. But instead of using each post, which is a for each loop that's going through and getting all of our posts, we're going to just cycle through the array that we create in this function we wrote in the last video. So this array, instead of going through all 50 of the videos in the database, it goes through all 50 of the videos, but it only gets their timestamps and their post IDs. Okay, I hope you can kind of see where this is going. And we're not going to do it in the main function. We're actually going to go down to the bottom, and we're going to create a new function so that we don't edit our main code. I'll show you why. It's much simpler this way, and also it kind of allows us to see what we're doing better. So we're going to call this load by date, and we can actually call it whatever we want, but I'm calling it load by date. I'm going to say this function handles loading videos by date. Once again, this is a laptop, and I'm used to an ergonomic keyboard. Okay, so now that we have that complete, the first thing we need to do is we need to kind of borrow from our other code. So where we wrote this code over here, we need to take all of this code. This is the one that we wrote that's getting that array, and the array that we have in here and doing this information. And now we can actually take that code back to where we want it, which is in our function here. And this is our function we wrote, like I said, that is going to be called instead. You're about to see that in a second. And we're gonna, that ended the PHP file. We don't want that there. We want that down here. All right. And so it had a double, it was closing the class. We needed to actually erase one and move it down here so that the class, this is included in the class. So now that we have this stuff into here, I'm actually gonna tab it in a little bit, just so we get a better view on everything. Right, and so this function is doing exactly what it was doing in our importer call. And in our importer call, I'm actually just gonna I think for the moment, I'm just going to go ahead and comment it out. I don't think I'm going to leave it. I think I'm going to remove it in the end, but this way you guys, even if I upload it to the GitHub, you guys can see what we kind of did and where it was. All right, so back over here, we now are getting that information the same way. We're getting all of our posts. Remember, I just said 100, so we're getting everything. We have that vids ordered array. If you watched the last video, you'll understand all of this. And then down here, it's printing the array twice. It's showing us what it looked like before and what it looked like after. Well, we don't need any of this code at all because we're not going to show the array anymore. We're just going to sort it. And this is a function inside of a function, by the way, which is okay because it's not a public function or anything. It's just being accessed by this usort inside of here. And okay, so here's what we're going to do now. Now that we have that same array that's being outputted that now has the date, times, and the ID stamps, now what we can do is we can make a new loop that cycles through and does some of the code that this page already contains to output its videos, but we can just modify in and get a post based on the ID. We've done this already before, but I'll go ahead and show you guys so that it kind of makes more sense to you. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to create, we're going to do a new cycle. So I'm going to go ahead after this usort function. It's still inside the main function. See this inside here is still inside the main function. You can do that in Visual Studio Code. When you click next to one, it will show you which is its opening and which one's its closing. I'm sure you know that by now, but if you didn't. So we're going to drop down here a few more lines. And the first thing we're going to say is now cycle through. I'm being really specific with my commenting, by the way, because you guys are able to download this to GitHub. Now cycle through the database and grab posts by ID with data. We're going to have to set up a second count for this so we can cycle through our vids ordered array and then we can put them in the database, kind of like how we did it in the other function. So I'm just going to make a new one called iCount, and I'm going to go ahead and set it to, actually not 0. I'm going to set iCount to the count of the vids ordered array. Remember, this is the one that contains all of our ones with our date, time, and our ID format. So however many we cycled through, like if we had 25 videos in our database, this would equal 25 because the code above is creating this for us. And then we need to create, what we need to do is we need to actually minus that count by 1. And I'll explain in just a second why we're doing this. In PHP, plus minus minus automatically takes 1 away, plus plus adds 1. The reason that we're doing this is because if you look at the way that the array was loaded, here, it is sorting them based on date and time, but it's doing it from oldest to newest. Okay, so if we were to cycle this array starting at item 0, it would actually give us the oldest video first. So we actually have to step this array starting at the count and going backwards. Okay, that's just the way that I had the function write it. So we're going to start at item number 49 and then count back to 0 in our display, and that way it puts the videos correctly based on how it sorts them here. So we're starting a count, which is the count of all the videos, say 50, or say, yeah, 50 minus 1, 49. So it's going to grab item 49. That's our first item. So, and you'll see in just a second why that makes perfect sense for what we're doing. So now what we need to do is we need to take the code from above, and we need to, from our function that already exists, that's building those table blocks, and we need to modify it to use this new vids ordered array versus just grabbing all the posts from our database. And the way that we're going to go ahead and do that is we're going to say if, and we're going to say count again, and we're going to count the vids ordered. Then we're going to say if it's less than 6. That means that we need to do that. If you remember the older video, guys, where we did this, this is all going to make perfect sense to you. You're going to see exactly, you know exactly what it's doing, and I'll go above and grab it so you can see it too. This is only going to be a single box of 6 items. All right. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up and we're going to take the code from our current function that's displaying. That would be this one here, the WP10 display. And we're going to grab we're going to go ahead and grab this code right here. This is the one that's running already for building 6 videos for us. So we need to go ahead and grab this, and we need to bring it back to our new function, and we need to place it inside this single order items box. Now, here's the thing. This is only doing this one time, so we actually have to create what we haven't done yet, which is a do while loop. We have to say do, and okay, do, and then while, and then a parameter, and then a close. And the parameter is going to be do while iCount is greater than 0. Remember how I said we have to count backwards? We have to count backwards up the array because the items are backwards in the array. So our our count is going to start at, say, 50 because we have 50 videos, and it's starting at 49. So it's saying as long as count is greater than 0, we still have videos to look at. And we're going to go ahead and increment the counter, but we're incrementing it down. So we're saying every time this function runs, we need it to take 1 off the counter so it gets the next video. Once again, in just a second, this is going to make sense. It's going to make perfect sense to you. And actually, this code now needs to go in there. So the first echo, or the first one opening up the entire box of the grid container, needs to go outside of the loop because we only want 1 of those. And then we need to set our closing div for closing the main one outside of the loop as well. So now we have a main opening closing grid. Then we need to take all of this for each, and actually we don't need the for each anymore because we're doing a do while loop. And then we need to take this code here and then put it right in here. And now I can quickly explain what's happening here. All right, so in this code, what's happening is it's doing a do while loop, which is going to handle our grid container. It's going to open a grid container just like above, the first 6 block grid container. And then it's going to create a grid item, and then it's going to go through and get the title and the video ID and the, actually, let me just do Control or Alt Z for word wrap. All right, it's going to get the ID, the image read, all the stuff it's getting to output. But there's a problem here. We don't have each post, do we? Each post was in the original loop we were using, but now we have a vids ordered array that doesn't have all this information by default, does it? It just has a timestamp and an ID. Well, how do we get the post? Well, this is really easy. We made this extremely easy on ourselves with what we did before. So let's just call a new function called curPost, or I mean a new variable, and we're going to say get post, and this is WordPress's built-in get post from the database. Now, what do you think we're going to use? We're going to use vids ordered because that's what contains all of our 50 items in it. Remember, to access an array, you use square brackets, and we're going to say at the I count, and then it's multi-dimensional like I showed in the last video, and we're going to get the ID. You see what's happening here? If you watched the last video, this should make a lot of sense to you. I explained this in depth about a multi-dimensional array. So what we're doing is we're saying the I count equals 50 minus 1 equals 49. That's the last item in our 50 array, because remember, programming starts at 0, not 1. So it's coming in here and it's opening the first, the overall grid container, then it's jumping into a loop and saying, okay, the current count is 6 or whatever. So it's going to say the current post equals get post vids ordered, which contains all 49, at the count, which is 49, the ID. And it's whatever post ID that is, because we gathered it in the last one. And it's already been time sorted, so it's getting the most recent video in our database using this. Then it's going to have everything accessible to us in curPost. All the same information you see right here is available the same way. So curPost, everywhere where you see each post, you can replace it with curPost, because now curPost contains all the same information because it gathered that post from the database. Exactly what happens when you do a loop like above for getting all the posts. See, we just got them right here, but we're getting a single versus a bunch of them in an array. We're getting just a single post. So this now is building the items exactly the same way that our other function was, except it's doing it based on an array where it has them timestamp ordered based on Google or YouTube's published at time and date. I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. I know I keep saying that because I know sometimes it's hard to follow along. That's why I'm trying to step these much slower. But we're already at like 15 minutes and there's still a little ways to go. So, all right, and in the first function, that's it for the first function. It's going to build our first box and then it's going to exit, okay, if there's less than 6 items. Well, if there's more items, now we need to build it the way where it has the show more button and all that. So we need to say build multiple boxes and containers, because that's what it's going to do here. So now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to start with the curPost. We need to still get the current post right here. Okay, that's the current count item, because once again, it's going to determine, is the count of less than 6 or is it more than 6, and it's going to make a determination on what to do. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go up and take our code from above, the second part of our function from above, because we already wrote this. That's after the else. So this is the same thing. If numvids was less than 6, equal to or less than 6, build this, else do this. We're taking all of this now from our short code above, and we're going to gather it all the way to this echo right here. We're going to take it to this last echo, then we're going to roll on down and put it into our new else. And I'm going to go ahead and give us some space so we can see this too. And then we have kind of a small issue in here as well, which is we still have the original variable or not variable, the original for each attempting to do its thing. Well, we don't need this for each anymore. We actually need to create a do function. We're not creating a for each for each of those. So instead what we're going to do is exactly like I said, we're going to create a do function. And actually what we needed to do is wrap the entire thing in the do. So we need to say do, and then down at the bottom, after it creates the new grid here, we need to, let's see, we're going to lower our counter, and then right here, what we're going to do is we're going to close our do, and we're going to say while, and it's the same thing you saw from before. It's while I count is greater than 0, because that means that we still have items to cycle in the array, and so that's what we need to do. So now also we need to always at the bottom increment the counter in reverse. So we have I count minus minus. All right, so this is a function that's already doing the same thing essentially that the first one was. It's not really much different except for it still has each post in it, and we can actually get rid of that loop altogether, which means we can just get rid of this. And now that's gotten rid of. So now this one should go ahead and head all the way up to our first do, which it does. And then that one should close it, and then these should be the enters. Okay, good. So everything's looking good now. So in here, everything else remains the same, except for we need these variables, don't we? Because we didn't put them in here. They're only being created outside of this function. So what we need to do is add them right here to the bottom. We can go get our variables as well from that first function. Like, this is just a lot of compiling. So we're going to grab all these variables, which is the ones that it's using from our original function, and then down here in the bottom again, we're going to put them right underneath our new, in our load by date, we're going to put them right here. So now we have all of these variables available to us to use inside of our function as our first one. Well, as I just showed you, you now have a cur post inside your do getting the current post. So you can go straight down here and you can replace each post and each post and each post and each post with cur post. You don't have to replace anything else because we reassigned the variables or values, and then we had to minus the count. And now we only have one more thing to do, which is outside of our final echo, what we're going to do right down here, we're still inside of our function right here. We're still inside of our overall new by date function. We still need to be inside of it. We need to take that button from above as well. The button that we created to show more videos right here. And down in the bottom, we need to add it right after this close right here. If all is well, it should work. Or no, we haven't called it. I'm sorry. We haven't called it. So back up in our first function again, we can now get rid of everything that's currently sitting in there because we're not going to use it. So we can get rid of all of this in our WP10 display. This is everything in our original function. We're just going to get rid of it for the moment. And what we're going to do instead is call to the new function. It's going to do the same thing. We're going to have to say this because we needed to call to the current class we're in, and then we need to say load by date, and then open and close parameters because there's none, and that's it. So now let's go check it out and see what we get. On line 434. I must have been sitting outside the function. Oh yeah, this remaining div needed to be in here. That's what happened. I had one of them outside. Then remember that closing div needs to be outside the while in each function. Okay, so look at what's happening here. Do you see something different? All of a sudden the mini truck's at the top, isn't it? But look at its ID. 488, 439, 440, 441, 442, 443. But look, post 448 is jumping over to 439. That's because these are now in proper order based on their published at release date. So since this video is at about 20 minutes, let's just quickly jump back through and I can explain in better depth what we just did and how we mainly just compiled off the code we had to create a new function called load by date. So as you recall, let's real fast recover. All this code that we created here we did in the last video. You can go back and check that out. I explained exactly how all this little function we built works. It takes all the videos in our database, sorts them by their published at date, which we gather from YouTube when YouTube gets imported. Okay, if you guys remember that, it gives us a published at date for each video. And then what we did is we sorted all of our videos by that published at date, and it gave us a new array. And the new array we called vids ordered. Vids ordered now contained an array that had a date, time, item in a multi-dimensional and an ID of the post. That means that each date time had a correlating ID, so we knew what went together. We didn't just have an array full of date times and nothing to compare them to. And then what we did is we said, okay, now that we have a date, time, and an ID, we can sort this or go get these posts one by one and display them. But we need to display them exactly how we displayed our last set. I want the same load more video type display. We already built that code, so what can we do? We can easily combine it. So we took everything from the first function in our display. This is our short code that's doing this. And we took everything from it. It's variables, everything. And we put all of it down here in our new load, right here in our new load by dates. This get all posts and came from our importer call function right here. We pasted everything in, all the I count and everything. Then we posted all our original variables in from our original one. Then we got all this code here, the for each loop for all of our posts and the date time and the use sort. All of that came from the code we built last time. What we did then is we added a new count, which is called I count, and we counted the amount of videos that our vids ordered gathered, and it should be 50 because it's so many videos in our database, and then we minus the first one. Why do we do this? Well, when the array is gathered, it gathers them backwards because it gathers them based on the earliest ones, or when it use sorts, it's sorting the oldest videos first all the way out to the newest, and it has them in reverse order. So if we were to display them without counting backwards, it would actually have the mini truck at the end and all the videos in reverse. So instead of starting at item 0 in the array and showing them based on 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, we had to start at 49, 48, 47, 46, 40, 45, 44. We had to count backwards, and so we had to minus our counter versus increment it up. Okay, that was just because of how the use sort function did it backwards. But if we have less than 6 items, we build it exactly like the original function. We took all this code from the original function, but instead of using a for each, like we've been doing the entire time, grabbing all of our posts, we only cycled through the vids ordered post, and we grabbed the item starting at the count, which remember, like I just explained, it'd be 49, and grabbing the ID. The ID contains this post ID, so we can use a get post function on it, and it returns all the same data that our for each function returns on each post. So we don't have to change really anything. All we have to do is update the current post information, and the code comes out looking exactly the same. Same thing with the else. If there's more than 6 items, each time we go into the do loop, we get the post, we get the current counted post, we get its ID, we output our let's see. This is actually something that does need to be outputted. Speaking of this only needs to be outputted one time. So it's outputting a whole bunch of JS right now. I just realized that actually should go outside the do. Okay, that's much better. It was outputting a ton of JavaScript, like bunches and bunches of these. It doesn't need to do that. Okay, so now what it's doing is if there's more than 6 videos, it's going through and it's doing all that first, like each 6, new first, all this code we created back a few videos ago. I showed you how we did this to create the first one, to know that it needs to click a button to open the second one, and the functions that are handling this is all this code right here. But look, we could do the same thing. We could gather the current post, and then we could just change all the current post information, leave everything else the same, minus our counter, and then show more vids, and everything else remained exactly the same. And we kept it in a separate function from our main so that it doesn't get confusing, and we can just call to it when we want to show it. Let me kind of minus these up, versus writing it all in here, which we could have done. Instead, I just made a separate function so we could keep our original code just so you guys could see it in the GitHub, and then you could see the new function we created right here, which is what it's doing separate. So you can kind of compare them side by side and see. Because guys, I know this is kind of a more advanced topic, but these are all features that you would really want it to have. I mean, by default, you'd want it to show all videos first, regardless of how they're imported in the database. You'd want to show them based on their published at dates, and that's what it's now doing. This will be in the GitHub, so you can go through and look at what I did if this was too fast or too confusing, and then you can kind of track each variable and see what it's doing. But like I said, all we did was take our code from our last video, put it into here, into this new function, add all the variables from our previous function, the display videos, instead not display box, display videos, not display videos. We took all the code from vid display. And then all we did was, instead of doing a massive for each that does everything, we just did individual do while a count was greater than 0. And then we just outputted each one similarly. I didn't change a whole lot in here. But anyway, hey, I hope this helped you guys out on how to do this. Like I said, once again, I'm sorry if it's a little confusing. Sometimes it's really difficult to show stuff like this. Even when they're in programming relatively easy functions, sometimes they're hard to explain to somebody who's just trying to build a plugin that's brand new. And I'm trying to steer clear of Ajax and all that really more advanced stuff that jumps on top. I'm trying to just stick to pure PHP and loops and basic functions, and that way we don't get too advanced too fast. Anyway, if you guys have any questions about this, let me know in the comments. I'd be more than happy to try to help you if you have any questions about it at all. Also, like I said, it's in the GitHub, which is in the description, so you can go ahead and take a look at it and download it. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. I think we're going to go ahead maybe and do like maybe a search box with autocomplete or something. I've been kind of thinking of more features and functions. Also, how to delete all information from a plugin when you're done with it, and a few other things. But hey, once again, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one.